Hello and welcome to We Stand Wednesday. I'm your host, Representative Chelsea Branham, and this is a highlight of organizations doing real work within our Oklahoma community. Today's special guest is one of my dear personal friends and amazing people extraordinaire, Sarah Adams-Cornell, and I'm going to let her give a little bit of an intro of herself, and then also some of the great work and organizations that she supports.
Well, thank you, Chelsea. Halito, Saho Chipos, Sarah Adams-Cornell, Choctaw Hoyosia. I'm so pleased to be here with you and to be invited to come on and have a chat. This is fantastic. This is a really great platform for sharing, and I can't wait to see who else you have on. I am one of the co-founders of Matriarch, which is an intertribal Native women's organization for women and children, primarily that are in urban areas around Oklahoma City and Tulsa. We have 2 chapters in both areas. And we meet twice a month during the school months, where we do a variety of things, mainly around education, around topics that impact our community, a lot of trauma healing work, and really just a support system. And it's just an incredible place to for our Indigenous women and non-binary people to come together to understand what it's like to be an Indigenous urban person and struggling through all the things that happen when you're not that close to your tribal nation, and it can be difficult to find resources. So we're about to start our 5th year. I'm so excited. I can't believe that it's always funny to me to think where we started and where we are now. I thought it might be, oh, maybe we'll do this for a year, but there is need. And so I'm glad to be a part of that. I also am involved in several other organizations, the Anti Project, which is a nonprofit with Dr. Amanda Cobb Greetham, who founded us to help feed children, Indigenous children in our community and beyond. And then working with Sovereign Community School. I'm also the president of the ACLU of Oklahoma, and doing work with Not Your Mascot and other really great groups around the state. So that's a little bit about me.
Well, as I mentioned before, advocate extraordinaire. So we're so fortunate to have you in our community and you doing the work that you do. I am fortunate to have gotten the benefits of being a matriarch fellow. So just happy to have that education and fellowship and just bonding time. It's nice to have a family outside of a family and have all those aunties and babies in the room. So the work
all the love.
All so we'll jump into questions. My first one, you touched on several different pieces of answering this, but wrap it up for us. What is the value that drives you to do this work? What is it that what is the itch you were attempting to scratch?
Yeah, I think as far as value, I don't know that I can attribute it to a single value, but it's more like a way of being. As you know, as an Indigenous woman, we thrive in community. Like, we're tribal for a reason, because we not just survive, but we thrive within community, knowing that we need each other from everything from child rearing to making sure that everybody is fed, being joyful together, mourning together. All of those things are healthier in community. And so it is because we are a part of those communities, we then see need. And when we see those needs, I think it's just a part of who we are as a people to fill that need. And our needs vary from time to time, But one need that was really surfacing about, well, it continues to surface, but at the time we were seeing an outbreak of suicides, of youth suicides in the Indigenous community, and kind of a feeling of hopelessness about what to do about it and how we could come together to save and empower our children with what we know, culturally speaking, is preservation, and is and make sure that they have the tools they need to prevent, well, not just prevent mental health crisis, but to provide mental wellness, and to really make sure that they're feeling that they have accessibility to those tools, that they are a part of our cultural makeup. They are built into our ways, our traditional ways, and celebrations and traditions. And so that was a huge need that was felt in our community. But I think you also know very well that you can't talk about one issue. We know that they're linked, that all of these things work together in a cycle when you're talking about wellness, suicide prevention. You also have to talk about oppression, and then you have to talk about all of the other things that create oppression. And so it's not, I wish it were easy to just target one thing and say, here it is. Unfortunately, that's not the way that it works. But I believe that that's who we are as tribal people, is we fill the need in the community, knowing that this is what makes us thrive. And I think we've actually seen our non-Indigenous community trying to emulate that as well. Lots more grassroots movement, lots more neighborhoods doing some organizing, and trying to form those smaller groups to sustain their neighborhoods and their lives.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I have realized in my advocacy work as well, is that it's all interconnected tapestry, right? So everything is all created and reinforced by other things, and you really can't just pick one or the other. It's kind of, we're whole people. So focusing on, issues for whole people is really important. And I've always seen that show up in everything that you do. So I appreciate that.
And we will, thrive or fall, either together or as individuals. So yeah, I think it's important.
So next question, what systems or policies reinforce this and or create some of the problems that you are trying to solve in community?
Ooh, well, that's a tough one to unpack. I love your questions. They are really difficult because they're multifaceted, right? Like there's not a touchstone topic that can unweave oppression, systematic oppression. Our country is running exactly as it was designed to work, to amplify the voices of land-owning, white, cis, straight men. And that's exactly what it's doing. And so when we're talking about, pointing to a place where we're needing to see a lot of change, it's like I want to, point to the whole thing. I don't know how you do that, but I think a good place to start is with our education system, because that is where we all generate from these education systems in our state. And if we're able to get to the root of the place where we're creating biases, where we're creating, that racist outlook on people of color, when we are whitewashing history, when we're determining, so much of that is learned, right? Like we know that these are learned things. Well, then we have to look at the systems that teach those. And so for me, education is a really great starting point. Not to say that that is the end all be all, it certainly is not. And I think there are a lot of, for my grandmother's generation, her her whole answer was like, education will set you free. Well, yes, but when you get to higher academia as well, it's as steeped in that oppressive language as K through 12. So we really have to look at all the avenues that we educate to start doing better. And we know better, and there's just not any excuse to not do it. It's laziness at this point if we aren't able to overhaul what we're teaching and how we're teaching in the classrooms. So that's a big one for me.
Yeah, I mean, more information and different information is always access to making different decisions. Not to say that everyone's going to make those different decisions, but it's definitely a good starting place, I think, because, you know, even when we think about the Tulsa Race Massacre, that wasn't, you know, taught in our schools until recently. And so without, you know, generations of people not knowing that, that enables you to not have an accurate understanding of what actually is going on and how systems are built. So,
And not things you live on, you know, like I think that's a very simple thing that people can do as a starting place is to find out whose land you're on, you know, consider, you know, what you do with that land later. There are lots of ways to give back to tribal communities through land. And so that's one place to start.
absolutely. All right. What would make the biggest difference for people that you serve on the interpersonal or systemic levels?
You know, I think having more accessibility to resources. I mean, I know that that's a large answer to say equity, but it is foundational. It is pivotal. Access to resources is absolutely something that is harming our communities. Accessibility to voting, accessibility to education, accessibility to food, accessibility to domestic violence and sexual assault, homelessness resources, to jobs. Like equity in general is for resources is maybe one of the hardest things. Like weekly for me, I receive calls from either friends or, you know, and I know that I've reached out to you 100 times to say, here's a need that we have right now. You know, what are the resources? Where can I send them? Where can I take them? And we make it incredibly difficult for people in need to assess resources. There was an Indigenous woman who was right out of jail, who had nowhere to stay, and my friends and I contacted you at the same time too. This was just last week with Cherie and Camille, and we had called at least 5 different places to try to find a place for emergency housing, and the only thing that we could end up finding was a private citizen who would allow her to stay with them. And that to me is just unacceptable, you know. In times when I'm sitting on a board in Oklahoma City to talk about housing and development and those resources, and it took 5 no's and then 1 community member again filling the need for these organizations who are doing this work, because it is too difficult to assess and meet all the requirements for something as simple as a place to sleep.
You bring up a really important point that organizations and community members are having to pick up the slack where public services don't extend. And while that's a great temporary fix, it should never be the ultimate fix. We should have systems in place that provide the resources and assistance to people within the community. We know that people are coming out of prison in those situations, and we don't have adequate support for them. And usually the only support we have is provided by organizations and nonprofits that are filling the gap. So As a person that serves on the state level, that's something that really drove me to run to begin with, is that I worked in a lot of nonprofit and community service organizations, and there's just so much unmet need where we are dropping the ball. And so that's, I am so fortunate and proud to have you all filling those needs, but also that's our responsibility and we're falling short on that. So the other thing that I want to put a little plug in, because I would be remiss if I didn't, is that representation 1,000% matters, right? When you have more people from your community that are in places of power, in the state, in the federal government, in organizations, that's when people within those communities get what they need. And we
Yes.
don't have enough Indigenous representation in the state, which is really disheartening considering we have, largest Indigenous population, second largest, I think, in the whole US, and, largest number of tribes here. So we've got some work to do.
We do.
We both know this, but um, I'm going to pause here and give you an opportunity to pose a question or challenge to those that are listening. So what would you ask of our community to help support the work that you're doing?
Yeah. My question is to look at your life and see how you can start decolonizing the ways that you live. To think about the community that you're in a smaller way. Think about your neighborhood. Think about the needs of the people around you, and to join forces with other people in your area to fill that need. Because as we were saying, community members get it done. They really do. And thank goodness there are, people like you, Chelsea, who have been exactly in these spaces and said, okay, I'm going to do this on a bigger level. But we have to remember that even sometimes it feels overwhelming, that you're like, oh my gosh, how do we do this? How do we indigenize spaces? How do we change the education system? Well, you do it one ask at a time. You do it one piece at a time. And so if you do that one piece, the next one's going to come along. So look for the needs, fill the needs, use your group of people around you to fill those needs as well, and just take it one step at a time to fill those needs.
Yeah, I love that. I talked with some people last week about having to kind of attack issues at all levels. And, systems and institutions are made up of individuals. And it takes all of those individuals not pointing fingers at others and saying they need to change, but all of us individually changing and making different decisions. So
just do your piece. I feel like Creator gave us these gifts and we all get to contribute, which really lends to the idea that it does take all of us. Because I don't know a lot about a lot of things, but I know something about a few things, and I can offer that. And then everybody has different talent levels, and so it really does take that community effort. And yes to what you just said.
All right, so final question here. So what have you experienced that most gives you hope for the work that you're doing, for this current moment that we're in? What keeps you, moving every single day to try to continue that work?
Sisterhood. I mean, it is paramount to the work that I do. I think that there is a high level of burnout in the work that you and I do, and that lots of organizers do, because it is difficult, challenging, trauma healing work. We're doing trauma healing. Like, we can call it whatever we want to call it, but at the end of the day, we're doing trauma healing work, and that's exhausting, especially when you have to live within the system that oppresses, and to do that work simultaneously. It can feel like it's moving at the speed of molasses. And so having a group of people around you who'll bring you dinner, who will send you a text, who will send you a cat gif, who will do something, who lift you up. And also knowing when to say, hey, I've got to take a quick break. And then those people step in for you. And then when they need a break, you step in for them. And people that you can call on whenever you need, when you need that help is really, I don't know how anybody does it any other way, quite honestly. If I didn't have you and all of the army of matriarchs and my other sisters in this work, I don't think I would have lasted this long, and I don't think I'd be doing what I'm doing, because it is just, it's important, but it is very taxing. And so my sisters give me hope and rejuvenation and love and care. And when I'm not caring for myself, they remind me to do that.
I need that reminder fairly frequently. And I am glad to have you and several others that are not afraid to remind me to do that. And that's one of the things I love about you, is that you make sure that I'm taken care of, whether I am making sure that I'm being taken care of or not. So
absolutely, you got to have the accountability partners who will always be like,
yeah. I get the finger point fairly frequently. So yeah, and I echo that. I think none of what I'm doing, none of the work that I have been trying to get accomplished would have happened without my sisters and support system. I've been in several meetings with several of my Indigenous sisters just this week, and have like 50 projects going with them. And without all of you, I would not be getting any of those done. So whether that's moral support or actual like sharing in the work, definitely couldn't do it without you all. So I think community is a really strong value for me, and always has been, which makes sense because that's where we come from. So I appreciate that you do that work too.
Thank you. And it's a joy, right? Like, it's one of those things where I wouldn't change it for anything in the world, because this is it's difficult, but this is where the joy is too.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, that is going to wrap up this week's We Stand Wednesday, and we will be posting some of the information and handles for the organizations that Sarah mentioned, Matriarch and the Auntie Project, and also Sovereign Community School, which is doing amazing things with Indigenous youth education. I would encourage you to support and check out all of them. And we will see you next week on We Stand Wednesday. Thanks.